So the classes that you're taking now, if you have not technically graduated, they are not post-bac classes. The Old Premeds Podcast, session number 306. Welcome to the Old Premeds Podcast. My name is Dr. Ryan Gray, and I'm here to take your non-traditional pre-med questions from a new place, from the Premed Hangout with the hashtag OldPremeds. If you go to premedhangout.com, if you are not part of our Facebook group, and ask a question and tag it with the hashtag Old Premeds, then we'll take that question. We'll look for great questions and ask them here on the podcast. Today we have a good question about a non-traditional journey and how to classify some courses. Before we jump in, though, I want to talk about the MCAT Minutes brought to you by Blueprint MCAT. If you are a non-traditional student, which if you're listening to the Old Premeds Podcast, you probably are, then one of the hard things is to try to understand when to take the MCAT. And because you're not a traditional student, kind of freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, etc., where it's easy to plug in where to take the MCAT, the thing that I like to think about is working backwards from when you're planning on starting medical school. So if your goal is to start medical school, let's say in 2025, kind of July, August 2025, then you would be taking the MCAT the year before then at the beginning of the calendar year. So January to April, ideally, of 2024, so that you can get your score back and you apply May, June of 2024. So work backwards. Think about when you want to start medical school, or ideally when you think you can start medical school, and work backwards and go about a year and a half before that time, and that's when you should be thinking about taking the MCAT. Let Blueprint MCAT help you with your study schedule by creating a free account over at blueprintmcat.com and get a free, amazing study planner tool that will allow you to create a study plan that works for your schedule. Again, that's blueprintmcat.com. So as we jump into today's episode, I'll read it here. It says, clarification on post-bac GPA when it's not actually post-bac. Hi, everyone. I'm new to the forums, just found the podcast, and I'm enjoying it so far. I have a bit of an unusual question. I went to college for 4 years, 2011 to 2015, for a non-science major and did not graduate, though I was close to graduation. I ended up enlisting in the Army. I've been active duty since 2016 and only recently decided I want to be a doctor. I have almost no science classes under my belt, and my undergraduate GPA is abysmal, just over 3.0. My only hope is that taking all of the prereq science classes, as well as some nursing classes I'm working on, will boost my GPA enough to be considered. I've heard that, quote, post-bac GPA is reported on a separate line on the application, as well as factored into the cumulative undergraduate GPA. Those are both correct. I started back on college classes in 2020, taking the remaining requirements to graduate from my original university online, thanks COVID. I qualified to graduate fall of 2021. However, I requested to defer graduation because I still want to take all of my science and nursing classes over the next few years. And I know that if you have a bachelor's degree, you no longer qualify for Pell Grants. So while I technically, quote, have a degree, I don't really. Well, technically, you don't have a degree. I am taking my science courses at a local community college because it's really the only option that works with my schedule, and I need the in-person labs. My question is this: since I don't technically have a bachelor's degree, even though you just said you technically do, will my post-bac GPA actually be reported on a separate line? My goal is to get a 4.0 or close to it, and I believe I can. I think that would look good on an application, but I'm not sure if everything will just be lumped together since I never technically graduated. If it is reported separately, where is the line between undergrad and postbac? Is it after I completed my graduation requirements, so GPA up to 21, and then after? Is it the break in time? Is it the different institution? Sorry for the long, convoluted question. It's actually not very long and convoluted. It's actually very straightforward. Post-bac is post-baccalaureate degree. If you do not have your degree, even if you have met criteria for that degree, you have not graduated. Therefore, it's not a post-bac. So the classes that you're taking now, if you have not technically graduated, they are not post-bac classes. They are undergraduate, senior level classes. And so if you go to the AMCAS manual, the applicant guide, as they call it, I call it the instruction manual, the applicant guide from AMCAS, they have a very straightforward way of trying to classify hours that works for this situation, works for a lot of non-traditional students. And that is 0 to 30 hours is considered first year or freshman, 30 to 60, sophomore, 60 to 90, junior, and 90 and above credit hours is senior. And so I've seen some really funky applications, PDF applications, where someone has like 70, 80, 90 senior credit hours because they never technically graduated, and all of the extra classes that they took were just lumped into the senior year. Don't worry about how that looks on the PDF of the application. Because remember, medical schools don't get that PDF. Medical schools just get all of the data points, and they have their own software to graph and manipulate and do what they want with all of that data. So they can look at the last 20 hours, 30 hours, 40 hours. They don't just see senior like the PDF of the application that you can print out from the application service. So as you're going through this process, sure, it's great that you haven't graduated. If that works well for you. Does it matter that you have graduated or haven't graduated? Not really. Not really. Will there be some medical schools that would prefer a separate line of, hey, we can filter out post-bac classes separately? Maybe. But again, they'll see a huge number of credit hours for your senior year, and they'll assume, oh, this is just a lot of extra classes that you took before you graduated. There's some unique situation here, and it'll be fine. So it's actually a very, very straightforward question. It's not long and convoluted. Very straightforward question. If you've graduated, post-bac. If you haven't graduated, it just adds on to whatever year that you are in. And if you can't really figure out, well, I'm not technically a junior, but just look at the credit hours, 0 to 30, 30 to 60, so on and so forth. So very easy, very straightforward, and hopefully will help you as you go through your process. Again, new way of asking questions for the Old Premeds podcast. Go to the premedhangout.com. Again, that's just premedhangout.com, which is our Facebook group that we have with over 18,000 amazing pre-med students in there. Ask your question with the hashtag old premeds, and then we will grab those questions and ask them here on the podcast. I hope you have a great week. We'll see you next time here on the Old Premeds podcast.